Alright guys, the goal of today's video is to cover asset strategy within Spartacus, which is also what we call our PM optimization module. Before going in the platform directly, let's cover a little bit about asset strategy to make sure we're all on the same page here. When we talk about asset strategy, what do we mean exactly? We're talking about all the preventive, predictive, and condition-based monitoring strategy that are deployed on your assets and components. Whether it's visual checks, PMs, operator rounds, greasing routes, oil sampling, thermographic routes, vibration monitoring, all those good things, this is what we refer when we talk about asset strategy. Here we're really talking about everything around the preventive and the predictive domain along the PF curve. This is really where we're located. So why do we deploy asset strategies? Really, big picture, our goal here is to be early on the PF curve, identify potential sign of failures, and ultimately plan corrective actions prior to a catastrophic failure. And then second thing, the more that you're deploying predictive and condition-based maintenance, well, those tasks have to be performed on the run. So as opposed to intrusive PMs that directly require the equipment to be down, you're getting a lot of uptime right away because you're going away from planned downtime. So as a whole, you're really maximizing equipment uptime. So those would be your main reasons why you perform asset strategies on your asset. So now that we've learned more about what are asset strategies, let's learn how this works within Spartacus. So we use a very simple workflow. It's a 3-steps workflow. Note that for this video, we'll only be covering step number 1, which is maintenance strategy, but the workflow is as follows. First thing, you would define all your maintenance strategy, whether you're doing it to a PM development exercise, a PM optimization exercise, a light FMEA, everything can be done within Spartacus. So this is really what we're going to cover today. Second thing, once those maintenance strategies are done, you can decide to continue and run them through Spartacus, or you can export them and run them through a CMMS. If you do run them through Spartacus, we'll cover how this works in terms of execution and management of your PM and PDM program. And ultimately, the outcome will be to visualize asset health. So let's dive right in. All right, so now we're in Spartacus, and I just listed the 3-step workflow that we touched on, and each of those steps, they have a dedicated module. So the first one being maintenance strategy, which is what we'll cover today. Afterwards, we can create our routes, build our routes, execute our routes, and ultimately, we have the asset health module, which is the output of using Spartacus, where really everything will be centralized in terms of all your predictive, preventive, and condition-based monitoring results. But let's dive into maintenance strategy to start. So if I click on maintenance strategy, so on the left-hand side, we're gonna have our asset hierarchy. For this simple example, we only have 2 areas, but this would be your areas. If you were to have much more than 2, they would all be listed here. As you see on the right-hand side, if I click on load more, I will have all my KPIs associated with the asset strategy that I just built. KPIs such as asset with at least 1 optimized task, components with defined failure modes, components with unoptimized task, covered failure modes, tasks assigned to routes. And ultimately, what you want to do is get all those KPIs to 100%. You're creating different asset strategies, but ultimately, you want to make sure that those are deployed inside the field and that you're running your asset strategy program. All of those KPIs are interactive, so right away, you would see here there's a gap. You can click on this, and it tells you where to go to make sure that you're bringing back this KPI to 100%. Also, you also have your expected yearly downtime based on your asset strategy. So those are all the tasks that are requiring a planned downtime. And you also see your expected yearly man time, and if you click on details, you will see what are the different trade that is required to perform your asset strategy at your site. Now what I'll do next is I'll click on one of those areas. So if I click on demo area, for instance, again, you can see that those KPIs adapt wherever I'm located inside the plant hierarchy. Let's click on this conveyor for this example. Under my conveyor, I'm gonna have all my components. In Spartacus, being a reliability platform, we've seen that deploying tasks at the component level, this is a really good level of granularity because afterwards, when it comes time to look at your corrective actions or at your KPIs, having tasks at the component level really helps. For instance, we always give the example of a conveyor, which is this case, what we're gonna look at. If at the end of the year, you always have hits on your conveyor, well, it's hard to know, okay, what's the problem on my conveyor? Is it my motor, my gearbox, my belt, my bearings, my pulleys? So really having the task at the component level really helps when looking at this afterwards and really being strategic about the results of our asset strategy program. So then if I click on one on my components, this is really where all the tasks will be defined. So the workflow that we use within Spartacus is as following. First thing, we're going to take our equipment and break it down into maintainable components. In this example, we only have a motor, coupling, gearbox, but we could have way much more. Then second thing, we're going to take our components. So now I'm on the motor page, and we're going to identify all potential signs of failure or symptoms of failure. And those is what we call failure modes. So in this case, I've only added 5 of them, but they could be much more than that. Easily, I can think of damage, corrosion, misalignment. And basically, this is a drop-down menu. And there's already a bunch of failure modes that already exist. And that failure mode library can be custom to your site or your corporation, for instance. Then, whether you're using Spartacus to do some PM development or light FMEA, you would start from here. Or also, if you want to use Spartacus to do some PM optimization, one step that you would have prior to that, you would load all your existing maintenance strategy program. So if you had a lot of tasks like check pump, check motor, you want to optimize those, we can load them manually within Spartacus, or we can load them to a mass Excel upload file. So as you see here, the task in red or the task in gray, those were the existing maintenance strategy. So we see a lot of inspect motor, grease motor, inspect motor. If it has turned out in red, it's because we decided to cancel it. So maybe because we decided that the task was really a non-value added task, or there was a lot of redundancy within this task. So we said, there's no more value for this task, so we canceled it. And then the second thing, we have task in gray. It's tasks that were there initially, but then we decided to optimize them into our new asset strategy program. And then the task in whites are basically new tasks that were being added to the maintenance strategy program, which means that those are tasks that were added because we want to cover failure modes that were left uncovered after defining all of our signs of failures. So right now I'm looking at my failure modes and I see that there are some failure modes that are uncovered. So let's add a task to cover the specific failure modes, and we're going to select loose bolts. So let's say I want to add a task where an operator comes in every day. I've put a paint marker on my bolts and my base to make sure that it doesn't move. So let's add this task within Spartacus. When I click on add task, this will be an objective inspection. It's going to be one worker. This will take 2 minutes for the task to be done. It's going to be done by an operator. I'll do it while my equipment is running. Failure mode that we're going to cover is loose bolts. Again, I want to do it every day. And this will be my task description. Once I'm done, I'm going to click add. And right away, you see here, I have my task that was added to the maintenance strategy. When I'm creating tasks, I can add way more details. So if I'm looking at this greasing route, for example, if I click on modify, in this greasing routes where we have lubrication detail associated with this task, so I see the quantity and the units. I can also add some measurements. We want to make this task as objective as possible, so they manually have to enter the quantity of grease that they've added on the drive end and the non-drive end. Those can easily be modified. I can define a min, a target, and a max. I can select my unit. So this works for quantity of grease, but you can imagine having this for checking pressures, checking temperatures. This can all be entered within this. I can add an attachment, pictures of the greasing point, pictures of the component, any other type of documentation that can help perform the task accurately. And ultimately, I can directly assign my task to a route. Either this can be done directly within this module, or we have a dedicated module to create route and plan route. If you're doing a PMO exercise, which means that you're taking an existing maintenance plan and optimizing it, what we have here is an optimization summary on which you can click. And basically, this allows you to see what was the output of the work you just did. So what was covered before the PMO exercise, what is covered afterwards, so you can see your risk reduction. You can also affect your RPN number by lowering or increasing your RPN risk. You can also see what's the difference between the type of tasks. Are we doing more objective inspection, more condition-based, where we favor doing tasks on the run, reducing planned downtime. You can also see the before and after of your trades overall, and again, equipment status before and after. So this is not a full FMEA tool, but it helps to do a quick light FMEA analysis after you're done with your PMO exercise. So this is what asset strategy looks like when being performed within Spartacus.